The sky had barely dimmed when Evelyn stepped out of the Uber with the covered pie dish in her hands. Her heels clicked against the driveway bricks, the sounds echoing as laughter erupted from inside the sprawling house, her childhood home, though it hadn't felt like home in years. It was the annual family reunion, the one she used to help organize before her father told her she wasn't really part of the family anymore. Still, she had come. She smoothed her pale blue blouse, took a deep breath, and walked to the front porch. As she reached for the doorknob, the door cracked open. Her stepmother stood there, face painted in forced delight. "Oh," she said, eyes grazing Evelyn like a stranger. "You're early." "I'm on time," Evelyn replied gently. "Dinner starts at 7. The woman leaned her head back and called out, "She's here," and then turned back to Evelyn with a cool smile. "Why don't you wait outside for a few minutes? The seating isn't ready yet." Evelyn blinked. "Wait outside." "It's not personal, honey," her stepmother said, tilting her head. "It's just, there's limited space inside, and the kids and the immediate family are already at the table. You understand." Before Evelyn could answer, the door clicked shut. She stood there, pie in hand, alone. Inside, voices were rising with cheer. Silverware clinked. Her younger cousins were laughing, probably over some inside joke. Her hands trembled slightly, not from anger, not from humiliation, but from the weight of every time she had stayed silent over the years. Every time she'd let herself be treated like a stray shadow in her own bloodline. She turned, walked back down the stairs, and sat quietly on the wooden bench near the driveway, her hands neatly folded over the pie. A few minutes passed. Then a low rumble pierced the evening. A long black SUV pulled in, windows tinted. The driver stepped out and opened the back door. Evelyn rose slowly, brushing her hair behind her ear. From the SUV, a man stepped out in a crisp navy suit. Broad-shouldered, calm, with sharp features softened by a kind gaze. He spotted her and smiled. "I'm not late, am I?" he asked. Evelyn's voice softened. "Right on time." He reached her and held her hand gently. "Are you ready for this?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Let's go inside." They walked up the steps together. When her stepmother opened the door again, her smile evaporated. I didn't know you were bringing someone," she stammered, eyes trailing from the man's expensive shoes to the luxury watch on his wrist. Before she could stop them, Evelyn and the man walked inside. The room fell still. Dozens of relatives packed at the long table stopped mid-conversation, some with forks halfway to their mouths, others mid-sip. Evelyn's father stood at the head of the table, glass in hand, halfway through a toast. He glanced at her, scowled. "Didn't we ask you to wait outside?" She opened her mouth, but the man beside her cleared his throat and stepped forward. "I don't believe we've met," he said calmly, offering a hand. "I'm Christopher Langston, Evelyn's husband." Gasps rippled across the room. Her father didn't move. "Langston," her uncle repeated, eyes widening. "As in Langston Tech?" Christopher nodded. "That's right." He turned toward Evelyn's father, who hadn't taken the handshake. "We just got back from our 3rd charity project in Malawi. I told Evelyn we'd come, even if it meant arriving late. She was worried about making a good impression. Guess she had nothing to worry about." Her father's fingers clenched the wine glass. His jaw twitched. Evelyn finally spoke, her voice warm but unshaken. "I brought your favorite, Dad. Blueberry peach pie. I baked it myself." Her father said nothing. Christopher placed a hand gently on her back. "I don't mean to intrude, but Evelyn has always spoken so highly of this family. She thought it was time I met them properly." The silence became unbearable. Then her grandmother, seated in the corner with a soft shawl over her shoulders, rose slowly. "There's an empty seat beside me, child. Come sit." Evelyn walked over, her hand still trembling slightly from the chill of the rejection, but her posture tall and graceful. As she sat, she glanced across the table, at her father, now struggling to recover his voice. His daughter, whom he'd made wait outside like a servant, now seated beside the wealthiest man in the room. But this wasn't revenge. It was her truth, gently shone. And it was only the beginning. The room tried to return to normal, but it couldn't. Not after that. Conversations became awkward. The clinking of glasses sounded forced. Laughter came in patches, uneven, jittery, artificial. Evelyn sat gracefully beside her grandmother, her back straight, her gaze soft. She didn't smirk, didn't gloat. That wasn't her style. Christopher leaned slightly closer and whispered, "You okay?" She nodded, though her breath caught in her chest. "I've waited my whole life to be seen, not paraded." He smiled gently. "Then let them see the real you." Across the table, her stepmother nudged her father. "Say something." He cleared his throat, raised his glass with a faint tremble. "To Evelyn and her husband. May they or continue their success." A few raised their glasses. Most didn't. The toast died midair. That's when her cousin Lauren, always smug, always in competition, smirked and said loudly, "I didn't even know Evelyn was dating someone, let alone married a billionaire." What? Was it a secret wedding or something? Evelyn turned her head slowly. Her voice was calm, but direct. "We had a quiet ceremony on a hill in Vermont. My grandfather's favorite spot. We wanted something meaningful, not flashy." Lauren arched a brow. Did he sign a prenup? There it was. The dig. The one Evelyn had expected. Christopher chuckled lightly. "I asked for one." She refused to even look at it. That silenced Lauren. Her uncle Martin leaned in. "Langston Tech, you say? You're not the guy who turned down the White House advisory offer last year, are you?" "I am," Christopher said, sipping his water. "Public office isn't really my thing. Too many dinners like this." He winked, lightening the mood, but his meaning wasn't lost. A few laughed nervously. Evelyn caught her father's expression. It was the same look he used to give her during school plays, detached, unimpressed, like he was waiting for her to mess up. But now there was something else. An unease. A fear of being out of control. She remembered being 16, overhearing him once saying to her aunt, "Evelyn's too soft. Too average. She'll never do anything meaningful." She'd never forgotten those words. And yet here she was. After dinner, people drifted to the back patio. The sky was now dusky purple, lanterns strung above the garden glowing faintly. Evelyn stood near the edge of the stone path, watching the hydrangeas sway in the breeze. Her father approached alone. He didn't meet her eyes right away. "I didn't know," he muttered. She didn't turn. "Didn't know what?" "That you'd end up like this." She finally looked at him. "Happy." He exhaled. "Successful." She gave a small nod. "You assumed I wouldn't. That I couldn't." He looked away. "It's not that I didn't believe in you. I didn't know how to handle you." She tilted her head. "Because I didn't want the life you tried to push on me? The husband you tried to arrange for me when I was 23? The job at your friend's company? The idea of marrying someone like Chris probably disgusted you, until tonight." He said nothing. "I didn't marry him for his money," she continued. "I married him because he saw me when no one else did. He believed in me before I believed in myself." Her father's shoulders sagged. "I see that now. But the way you treat people," she said quietly, "even your own blood, you wait to see who they become before deciding if they're worthy. That's not love, Dad. That's investment." He winced. "I came tonight because I hoped maybe you'd changed. But when you made me wait outside like I was a caterer, I realized you haven't." He tried to speak, but she gently held up a hand. "It's okay. I'm not angry. I'm just tired of trying to prove myself to someone who never wanted to see me." From behind them, Christopher walked over and slipped his hand into hers. "Everything all right?" She nodded. Her father looked at them both and asked something she never expected. "Will you come by the house sometime? Just us. No one else. I'd like to get to know you again." Evelyn studied his face. For the first time in years, it looked human. Not a mask of pride, or authority, or judgment. Just a man realizing he might have pushed too many people away. She gave a slow, gentle nod. "Maybe." The next morning, the family group chat lit up like fireworks. Aunt Karen sent a photo from the reunion captioned, "Who knew Evelyn's husband was the Langston?" Uncle Martin responded with a string of wide-eyed emojis, followed by, "Did anyone else catch Dad's face when he realized who Christopher was?" Legendary. Evelyn read the messages in silence as she sipped her tea on the balcony of the hotel suite. Christopher stepped out behind her, coffee in hand, hair still damp from the shower. "Regretting showing up last night?" he asked. She shook her head. "No." "But it's strange how quickly people shift their tone the second they think you matter." He took a seat across from her. "You always mattered. They just didn't have the eyes to see it." She smiled softly. "That's what makes you different." He reached across and gently ran his fingers along hers. "You were calm, poised. I couldn't have done what you did with such grace." "I didn't want revenge," she said. "I just wanted peace." Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was her cousin Lauren. "Lauren, hey, about last night. I was out of line. I didn't mean to come off so rude. Just shocked, I guess." Evelyn stared at the message for a few moments, then typed a simple reply. "Evelyn, I appreciate the apology. It takes maturity to say that." She meant it. Later that day, as she and Christopher walked into the city for lunch, her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated. Picked up. "Evelyn." The voice was dry, raspy. "Grandma?" There was a soft chuckle. "Still recognize your old woman?" She laughed. "Of course I do. I want to see you. Alone. Before you leave town." Evelyn paused, glancing at Christopher. "Of course." An hour later, she walked through the creaky front gate of her grandmother's old house. Nothing had changed. The rose bushes still flanked the porch. The screen door still whined when opened. Her grandmother sat by the window, a crocheted blanket on her lap, and a photo album open beside her. "I want to show you something," she said as Evelyn hugged her gently and sat down. The old woman flipped the album. Inside were pages of photos Evelyn hadn't seen in years. Photos of her as a child, as a teen, and then an envelope tucked behind one of the pages. "What's this?" Evelyn asked. "Something I held onto, just in case." She opened the envelope. Inside were two things: a newspaper clipping with a headline, "Local Artist Donates 1,000 Meals from Charity Show," and a handwritten letter. The article was about Evelyn's art fundraiser from years ago. She'd nearly forgotten it. The letter was from her grandfather. "To whoever reads this after I'm gone," it began, "I want you to know that Evelyn is special. Not for her money. Not for her degrees. For her soul. She has a kindness that this family often mistakes for weakness. But they're wrong. Kindness is the truest form of strength." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I always believed she'd grow into someone powerful, not loud, not ruthless, but powerful in the way soft rains carve canyons. If this letter reaches her, tell her I saw her. I always saw her." Her vision blurred as she folded the paper slowly. Her grandmother placed a hand on hers. "He wanted you to have that. But your father never understood you. Not the way your grandfather did." Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the ache come, letting it pass. She stood after a while, helped her grandmother to the kitchen and made tea, then cleaned a few shelves, fixed a loose door hinge, and organized her medications. As she left that evening, her grandmother said, "You came when you didn't have to. That's what makes you different from them." Evelyn hugged her tightly, whispering, "I'll always come for you." Outside, as she opened the car door, she saw someone watching from across the street, her father, standing still on the sidewalk, hands in his coat pockets. She didn't move toward him. He didn't wave. But before she got in the car, he mouthed something. "Thank you for not humiliating me." She gave the faintest nod. That was never her goal. And he finally understood that. 2 weeks later, Evelyn stood in front of the same door where she had once been asked to wait outside. This time, she was alone. No chauffeur, no billionaire husband at her side. Just Evelyn, wearing soft beige slacks, hair loosely tied, a simple tote bag over her shoulder. Her father had invited her again. She hadn't said yes or no. But here she was. She pressed the bell. The door opened, and this time, he answered it himself. He looked tired, not the powerful, commanding man who once ran the entire family dynamic with a single raised brow. Just a man with time on his hands and regret on his face. "Thanks for coming," he said softly. She gave a small nod. "You asked." He stepped aside and she entered. The house felt different now. Not because of the decor, it was all the same. The scent of polished wood, the ticking grandfather clock in the hall, but because something in her had changed. She didn't shrink inside these walls anymore. They sat in the living room. No small talk. Just silence for a moment. "I want to apologize," he said. She looked up, calm but unreadable. He went on. "For the way I treated you. I used to think strength looked a certain way. Loud. Unapologetic. Ruthless. But I watched you at the reunion. How you handled everything. How you didn't embarrass me, even though you had every reason to. And it humbled me." Evelyn didn't speak. Not out of anger, but to give him the room to continue. "I spent years resenting the parts of you I didn't understand. Your empathy, your choices. But you turned out better than I ever imagined." Still, she said nothing. So he asked the one thing he'd never asked her before. "What do you want from me, Evelyn? After all this, what would make things right?" She stared at him a long moment, then said something he didn't expect. "Nothing." His brows drew together. "Nothing. I don't want anything from you," she said. "I don't need anything. I came because I wanted to see if there was anything left to rebuild, not to punish you." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Then can we start over?" She gave a long pause, then quietly replied, "We can try." Over the next hour, they talked more than they had in years. He asked about her artwork. She told him about the programs she and Christopher had built in rural schools. He asked about the night of her wedding, and she finally explained why they hadn't invited the family. Not out of spite, but peace. At one point, he said, "I keep wondering what your mother would say if she were still around." Evelyn's throat tightened, but she smiled. "She'd tell you to stop acting like a statue and hug your daughter." He laughed. For the first time in decades, he laughed with her. When she left, he walked her to the car. As she stepped inside, he asked, "Would it be okay if I visited you sometime?" She paused, hand on the door. "You can come next weekend," she said. "Christopher's planning to cook." He looked surprised. "He cooks better than anyone I know." He smiled. "Then I'll bring wine." They nodded, a small bridge finally rebuilt. But the real twist, the one that came days later, was something no one expected. The Langston Foundation made a public announcement. They were launching a new arts initiative to build creative spaces in underserved schools across the country. The program would be named after Evelyn's late mother, a woman who once painted the corners of their tiny home with daisies and stars when Evelyn was still learning to hold a brush. And at the press event, standing beside Christopher and Evelyn, was her father. He didn't give a speech. He didn't need to. But he stood there, hand resting on his daughter's shoulder, silent and still, as the cameras flashed. That night, social media exploded. CEO's wife honors her mother in national art movement. Billionaire couple gives back in the most unexpected way. Father reunites with daughter at heart of national story. But none of that mattered to Evelyn. What mattered came quietly. A letter in the mail from her cousin Lauren. It wasn't long. Just 6 handwritten lines. "Dear Evelyn, I used to think kindness made people weak. But you've shown me otherwise. I hope I can learn from you. Love. Lauren." Evelyn tucked it in her nightstand. Not as a trophy, but as proof that sometimes the softest voices echo the loudest when the world is finally quiet enough to hear. A month later, Evelyn and Christopher hosted a small dinner at their home. No formal invites, no speeches, just warmth, candles, laughter, and the smell of slow-roasted herbs filling the kitchen. Her father arrived quietly. He brought flowers. "Not sure what kind you like," he said awkwardly. She took them with a smile. "These are perfect." As guests trickled in, Lauren, Aunt Karen, even her cousin Ben, who once mocked her art, something felt different. No one looked past her now. No one tried to speak over her. They listened. They asked questions. They saw her. At the table, her father raised a toast to second chances and daughters who lead with grace. This time, every glass lifted. Later that night, Christopher handed Evelyn a small box. She opened it and found a key. "To the new studio," he said. "You're going to change lives there." Tears welled up. Not because of the gift, but because she'd come so far from the girl who once sat outside with a pie in her lap. Evelyn stood on the porch after everyone left, the wind soft against her skin. Behind her, her father stepped out, hands in his pockets. "Thank you," he said again, "for forgiving me." She looked at him gently. "I didn't forgive you because you asked. I forgave you because I needed peace." He nodded, eyes misty. "You've become the strongest person I know." She smiled. "That's because I stopped waiting to be seen and started living like I mattered." And for the first time, he saw her. Fully. Quietly. With pride.